The only way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles, got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the team.
You guys for joining us to another episode of Free Agency Frenzy here, presented by TWSN, live on the Sitdown Malik Wright's YouTube channel. I'm Malik Wright, joined by co-host as always, Daniel Alameda. Got a jam-packed show, a lot of stuff to get into, a lot of stuff to talk about. But before we do us a favor, make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. Listen, the Bengals are not active for another day.
Yeah.
Bengals are not active for another day so far. And, this is a little bit different situation because, last night's show, I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt, right? I was even told, hey, negotiating with Tevin Jenkins, trying to get a guard in here, trying to get a player in here. And nothing has come of it. Nothing has come of it so far. I'll tell you why I'm annoyed, Daniel. I'm annoyed because, the simple fact that you told everybody that we're going to attack the guard market, we're going to be aggressive, and you've sort of rested on your laurels. Who gives a damn about what a couple of $1 million difference might be for a guy like Tevin Jenkins or somebody in here? Right? You look at a guy like Kevin Zeitler. I told everybody that wasn't going to happen. Disrespect was real. That bridge is burnt. It's never going to happen again. But you have the opportunity to go out there and make a real serious push. While other teams are signing defensive tackles that could have certainly helped upgrade what you had last year, because I definitely think Levi was an upgrade over BJ Hill. Mm-hmm. But you let that guy go back to Detroit for only $5.5 million. What are you doing to actually get better? Somebody said it perfectly in here, asleep at the wheel. And understand, it takes two to tango. Gave you the benefit of the doubt day one. Gave you the benefit of the doubt day two. Didn't love the moves that you made on day two, but I was trying to understand the vision. I still understand some of the moves you made. It's very disappointing for all Bengals fans, and I certainly feel for them, Daniel. I have a tendency to go on, and I'm probably going to go on, and we're going to talk about all the different free agencies, free agent moves that happened today that weren't Bengal noteworthy. But I want to get what your thoughts are so far on the non-activity.
Man, we're talking about a span of 60 hours, Malik. And same thing. On yesterday's show, I started off and I was like, listen, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, especially if they get a deal done with the Jenkins. Like, you're 3 days in a free agency and you haven't addressed the biggest need, right? I understand. And we talked about it. We'll talk about it more. Went back and watched some of the film for a guy like TJ Slayton. Looks like a productive guy. Looks like somebody that can, be an addition to the Bengals defensive line room. But there is two clear holes, mainly one on the interior offensive line, but you can upgrade the other position, and they're choosing to sit on their hands right now. And that's the frustrating part. So Bengal fans should feel frustrated when you see these other teams maybe not out there splurging, but Malik, you see these other contenders making moves to get better, making moves, not only flashy moves, but to fill holes on their roster. And we're talking contenders, whether it's, the Buffalo Bills, for as much as we can talk about the terrible contract, maybe of, an Ogunjobi and maybe of a Joey Bosa. They're trying to get better. And they saw a hole at edge rusher, and they went out in the first 2 days and they addressed that need. And the Bengals aren't doing that. And this is what, if we put ourselves in the mind of what the Bengals are thinking, it's either they're being cheap or they just believe in what they had last year. And I think that is a terrible way to go about it. And my frustration, Malik, from thinking about this, I've gathered my thoughts from the first 3 days. The Bengals are putting so much pressure on themselves to hit on this draft. And that's my biggest takeaway from this. You're looking at letting the first wave of free agency go, letting the second wave of free agency go. Malik, I'm very concerned they're going to be at a place where they're going to have to rely on a round 2 guard to be better than Cordell Volson last year. They're going to have to rely on these young cornerbacks. They're going to have to rely on Geno Stone. And that's my frustration because, Malik, if Tevin Jenkins goes to another team, they're apparently not interested in Becton. Where does that leave them? And it leaves you with hoping that a guy who hasn't panned out, a 33-year-old, a guy who is PFF grades are terrible, you're left pretty much with scraps. And why not just keep Alex Kappa at that point? That's not why you made the move.
Alex Kappa was the worst guard in football last year, but
yeah,
starting guard.
No, he was terrible. But at this point, are we just relying on the back end of free agency? And it seems like that's, how it's going about it. And like I said, well, you have to fill the hole. Yeah.
Well, I think the big issue for me is I can see if you haven't been aggressive to a degree to, because you're signing your own players, but T. Higgins is still not official, not signed yet. Jamar Chase's deal isn't done yet. Trey Hendrickson is still out there waiting in the wind to see what the Bengals are trying to do. My good friend Cam Wolf made the announcement today on NFL Network where he talked about the Bengals asking price for Trey Hendrickson and all over the place. First, it's like Trey's camp says this, Bengals camp say Bengals are saying this. Now, apparently, the Bengals asking price is a first round pick and more for a guy like Trey Hendrickson, which is unrealistic at this point, especially considering the age of Trey Hendrickson and him going to be needing a new contract. So it feels like there's, it feels like there's not a serious effort to really put that guy in open market and actually, get real assets back. So it's like, what are you doing? You the morale gets set back a little bit, right? If deals aren't getting done, if players are in situations where they are unhappy. So I'm trying to make light of the situation. I'm trying to find a glimmer of hope to a degree. I still believe the T. Higgins deal gets done, but the more you wait, the more you're robbing yourself of adding more players to the pot, so to speak.
Yeah.
I saw someone saying, well, free agency is not how you start, it's really how you finish. And I agree with that. I agree with that if you weren't in the Bengals situation where your defense was piss poor last year and the interior of the offensive line was so bad, you already cut your starting guard. So therefore it's a major need there. You can't afford the opportunity to just sit and wait and kind of just play the same game you've been. You have to make a concerted effort to get better because while you might be playing the waiting game and trying to wait these guys out, other teams are going to try to, jump in and really sign some of these guys. And then you're going to be left sitting there wondering, even if you say, hey, you know what? We're going to build the trenches through the draft. And let's say if you're eyeing a guy like Tate Ratledge, for instance, out of Georgia. Well, the idea is if you were to draft that guy in the second round, you hope that guy plays to a great level. What happens after 4 years? You don't have the fifth-year option to work with, right? You don't have the fifth-year option to work with. So if he plays out of this world, you're going to be stuck in the same situation that you are now currently in, but just 4 years down the road. You're still going to have to pay him premium money at the guard spot, and you're going to have to be willing to fork that over. And that's where the Bengals are in this weird triangle, so to speak. It feels like you're going around and over and over and over again, repeating the same cycle, expecting a different result. Even if you are banking on the draft and that player winds up playing great, you're still gonna have to pay the piper down the road.
Yep.
You still are gonna have to do that. So these free agents that people were talking about, right, like a Brandon Sheriff or whoever the case may be, well, I think they need to really approach this from a different angle. I really do, man. I've been very vocal about the way that they approach the guard position and their reluctance to actually make a considerable change in the way that they think when it comes to signing guards and how much money they're willing to fork over for these starting guards. The fact of the matter is the Bengals are in this situation because they've chosen to pretty much go the absolute average route of trying to get better. That's really what it comes down to, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have made a concerted effort several times over to sign some of these guys, and you chose not to, right? Mekhi Becton not being in the fold. Obviously, there was some disrespect last year, not only with the offer, but not wanting to meet him where he, I guess, what he was asking for. Understandably, when he met with Cincinnati before, he was hoping to play tackle. That didn't happen. It's just a lot of question marks right now for me, Daniel. But we can talk about some of the guards that are still. We can talk about some of the guards that are still available. I think we got a little ticker going, right, where we can show some of the guards that are available, some of the interior of the offensive line that are still available. I want you to touch on this a little bit more. Who are some names out there that you think that make realistic sense for the Bengals? Obviously, we've talked about Tevin Jenkins. If you want to head on over to the board, you can too. But the way I see it, man, I see it as I feel like there are still some options that are notable upgrades for what the Bengals have done so far. I mean, for what the Bengals had last year, I think there are some upgrades that the Bengals can absolutely work with. And I don't know. I'm really just curious to hear Daniel's thoughts. So let's go to Daniel and see what is potentially available.
Yeah. So I mean, as we're looking at this, Malik, first off, shout out to the new board. I'm looking at this. Obviously, Tevin Jenkins is the guy, right? Tevin Jenkins is the one that we're looking at. There's a guy, and Brandon Scherf is the next guy that I'd definitely be looking at. And just if we're looking at Scherf, or looking at some of his PFF grades, I think the biggest thing with him is this dude is a veteran, right? This dude is a guy that has done it at multiple stops, and he's somebody that I would be confident saying, hey, what is your replacement over Alex Kappa? What are we looking at? We're looking at a guy who's been relatively healthy, throughout his career. But I mean, you just look at his pass blocking grades, as well as this dude has just done it at a quality level. And it's almost like, what the goal was last year with the tackle that they brought in to, kind of lead into Amarius Mims. You're looking at a guy that is quality guy. And like I said, he's done it at multiple stops. So I would definitely be looking at Brandon Scherf as one of the guys. There's another guy, and I'll go over to his name in a little bit, but shout out to one of our co-hosts on the show, Logan Fulmer. He said Tristan Colon from Arizona Cardinals, and this may be a name that's kind of new to some people, but he is a guy that has done it, at Baltimore for 3 years, and they went over to Arizona. And something I really like about him is this dude has just been able to fill whatever hole, has been on their team. You look at the Cardinals, right? He played left guard for them, but you look at his time with the Ravens, this dude played center. He played right guard. He's played a little bit of tackle. And like I said, I'll get his grades up in a second, but this is a second tier guy. I'm hoping that you get a Tevin Jenkins, and then you get a Cologne to come in here and say, hey, I want you to compete with Cordell Volson. So like I said, I'm a huge fan of Tristan Colon. My concern is that the Bengals whiff on a Tevin Jenkins and have to rely on a Colon, or have to rely on a Scherf as their main left guard. Or main right guard. So that's just kind of how I view the guards right now, Malik.
Yeah, can you actually highlight the pass rush? I want you to go a little more in detail. With some of these names, right? There is the Brandon Sheriffs of the world, the Tevin Jenkins of the world. There are still some names out there. I want you to actually highlight some of those pass blocking grades so people can kind of see. And then there's the one name that we talked about before so many times on the show, and that's a guy named Dalton Risner, right?
Yeah.
Dalton Risner is a guy that has like turned a lot of heads for the Vikings, albeit he missed a lot of time, 7 games due to a back injury. But this is a guy that absolutely 100% made a name for himself with the Vikings. And he, it doesn't seem like they're bringing him back. They seem pretty set at the guard spot and what they want to do. But if we could jump into it, man, we could talk about some of we can actually talk about Dalton Risner and dive deep into his numbers to a degree. So that way the people get a better understanding of why I've always been big in mentioning a guy like Dalton Risner and what he could potentially do for this team.
No, for sure. And we can go back to Scherf in a second as well. But you look at Dalton Risner, you look at his pass blocking grade. The question with him has never been, can this dude play? Right? The question with him, and I'll scroll up a little bit. The question with him has always been, it seems like he views himself higher than what, NFL teams view him as. And it's always been the contract situation. You look at kind of what he did. He played 2 years with Minnesota. Both years were very productive. This dude gave up 0 sacks. He gave up 0 sacks in his 2 years with Minnesota. And that's the upside you want, right? He's a guy where you're not getting crazy injury concerns with him, right? Tevin Jenkins, I understand there are the injury concerns. Mekhi Becton, I understand there are the concerns. Is that dude playing tackle? Is he playing guard? But Dalton Risner, the thing with him, first off, he fits the Bengals what they want, right? They want 6'5", 6'6". They want the biggest guys on the offensive line. And that stays true with Amarius Mims. That stays true with Orlando Brown. Even Cordell Volson is an absolute mammoth of a man. And Dalton Risner kind of gives you that same thing, right? 6'5", and he has just been a quality performer his entire career. And you look at what he did this past season. I mean, he played the last 8 games of the season, and he was extremely productive. So Dalton Risner is a guy where the concern should never be, is he healthy? The concern is, get him on your team, right? And once you get him on your team, I'd be very confident he's going to perform very, very well. The issue, once again, is why haven't they gone after him before? This dude's been available, and he's been available to many teams. I'm sure some of you guys remember on Twitter, there was the conversation, oh, does he want to be in Cincinnati? We had the same conversation last year. So he's been available, and I'm just confident if this dude gets on the Bengals roster, he would be a massive upgrade over Alex Cap, and I truly believe he'd be a massive upgrade over a guy like Cordell Volson as well. But heading over to Brandon Scherfs real quick.
Before you actually head over to him, one thing I want you to touch on when it comes to Dalton Risner.
Yeah.
Dalton Risner is, in my honest opinion, I think that something has to be talked about regarding the fact that he had, well, how many penalties did he have? 0 penalties.
Yeah.
This past year, he let up 0 sacks. Those are numbers that the Bengals would absolutely kill for at their spot. Absolutely kill for at the guard spot. So I don't understand why, like, you can't be nitpicking when you don't have a huge pool of players to actually pick from. That's my biggest issue. Like, I really believe Dalton Risner could genuinely be the Cincinnati Bengals, Mike Gesicki of this year.
Yeah.
It's a guy that we've talked about so much that it will cost very little, that teams have been unwilling to commit long-term to. At the very least, you're getting a very strong pass blocker in here. It's a guy that you had interest when he was coming out of Kansas State. It didn't work out. You didn't draft him. That's fine. You have the ability to rectify that mistake, which is why I've pounded the table for a guy like Dalton Risner. And, I personally think that he would be a huge upgrade for what they're looking for. But Dalton Risner allows you the ability to add a guy in the draft, and that guy can grow, can learn, can mature. Yes. It's very evident nobody is beating down Dalton Risner's door for whatever reason. Maybe it's injuries. Maybe it's attitude. I have no idea. But at this point, you can't try to say we're not willing to sacrifice culture. You drafted a guy like Jermaine Burton.
Yeah.
You drafted a guy like Jermaine Burton. What is so bad about committing to Dalton Risner that you're like, you know what? We don't know. We rather explore other guard options. Dalton Risner would step in day one and be the best guard on the Bengals.
Yeah.
I'll even listen to the Will Hernandez talk. And albeit Will Hernandez is a smaller guard standing at 6'2", and he's coming off of an injury. I'll still listen to it. But you can continue, Daniel. But I genuinely think Dalton Risner is a guy that we're getting to the point. We're getting to the bottom of the barrel at this point.
Yes.
And I don't think he's a bottom of the barrel type player, but we're getting to the bottom of the barrel of guys that people aren't banging down their doors to add. So at this point, you can't nitpick anymore. You can't say, I think I want this guy. You have to literally, honestly, at this point, go who the best player available is. And believe it or not, there are still some really good, solid options, like a Brandon Scherf. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Brandon Scherf is from Ohio. Like, there are some considerable upgrades the Bengals can make at the guard spot right now. Why are we making this more than what it is? We should be moving on to the next position, right?
Yeah.
We should be moving on to defensive line. We should be moving on to making adds to the linebacker position, even potentially adding a veteran quarterback. These are the moves the Bengals should be making. But here we are, understand it is the official start of the new league year, right? Yeah. It is the official start of the new league year, but it has been essentially 3 days. And Kane says, I personally think you need to practice pronunciation. Kane, I'm from New Jersey. We pronounce words a little different here, so I apologize if things are a little bit off. You need to not nitpick, brother, and actually just enjoy the stream. But anyway, we appreciate you for joining in. And while we got you here, if you guys could do us a huge favor, give this video a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. But Daniel, continue. I apologize.
No, you're good. And just adding to the Dalton Risner conversation, the simple answer, Malik, is you're being cheap. That's the answer, right? You're trying to nitpick at these players, and you're trying to, and I'm not saying you, I'm saying the Bengals, they're trying to nitpick and say, well, this guy is this concern. We need the perfect guy. At this point, you have to better your roster, and you have to make this a priority. I understand if this is, the safety position. We'll talk about it in a second. But I understand if this is a different position. But you have a clear hole at this position, and we're trying to find the perfect player. Get a couple of these guys in here, right? You've got the cap space right now to do it. Get one of these top-tier guys and get one of these lower guys. But going into Dalton Risner, like you said, Malik, this guy was premium draft capital, right? Second-round pick.
And I apologize. It's Dalton Risner.
Risner, okay.
It's Dalton Risner. I think that's it. I think that's what it is. Dalton Risner. Yeah. I'm going to try to integrate that into my speech. Y'all know how you should hear the way I pronounce water. It's water, right? That's the way you guys water, but we say water in New Jersey. So I apologize.
No, you're good. And just looking at, like you said, Dalton Risner, second-round draft capital, and this is a guy where there isn't a concern, right? Let's list all these other guys, right? Tevin Jenkins, injury concerns. Yes. Will Fries, there was concerns. How's he going to return from his injury? This dude just played last year. and he played at a phenomenal level for the Minnesota Vikings. And that's what's concerning with me is you're not getting a 36-year-old. You're not getting a guy who's not proven. You're getting a guy who has proven it just this past season. You're getting a guy who I believe is 29. He's about to turn 30, but he is an absolute pro, and he's been widely regarded as a very, very good guard. And like you pointed out, this dude had 0 penalties last year, not a single penalty. And the year before, he only had 3. And when you look at the sacks he's given up in the past 2 years, this dude has given up 2 sacks. He only allowed 1 quarterback hit in his entire 7 games last year. So, like I said, the Minnesota Vikings was a very complex offense, and he helped them out a boatload. So Dalton Risner for sure is somebody where this guy was available last year. He's available now. I'd be confident saying, hey, if this guy would totally be an upgrade at the position, and you just hope that the Bengals are viewing it the same as well. But one last guy, Malik, I was touching on Tristan Colon. I just want to go to his PFF numbers real quick.
Sure.
Just looking at it, even what he did last year, I understand this Arizona Cardinals offense was all over the place last year. They didn't have a consistent run game. They didn't know what the hell they were doing in the passing attack, but this is a dude who gave up 0 sacks last year. 0 sacks. And obviously he was a spot starter for about 8 games last year, but 0 sacks, and he only had 1 penalty. And this is a guy who you are looking for guys who are versatile. I'm looking for a guy who's done it, at right guard last year. I'm looking at a guy who's done it at left guard the year before. I'm looking at a guy who started his career off as a center, right? Played 2 years at center for the Baltimore Ravens. So he's one of the guys I'd be looking at. I'm targeting, saying, hey, I'm bringing him into my team. There's no real injury concern. This guy is versatile. And the same thing, he's 6'4", 6'5", bigger body guy. So Tristan Colon is one that I'm definitely a fan of. And one last stat, Malik, real quick. I found this, when trying to find how important it is to get a great pass blocking team. 7 of the 8 teams that made the Super Bowl, Malik, in the past 4 years all had top 7 grades in pass blocking. And that's something that the Cincinnati Bengals need to make a priority. And I promise you right now, if they don't go after the Jenkins, if they don't go after Risner, if they don't go after Scherf, it's going to be tough sledding for the interior of the offensive line. And let's not forget as well, the current center for the Bengals is good, but he's not elite. You've got 2 potential elite tackles, but it all starts at the interior of the offensive line. So I'd be very concerned, and I'd be making these guys maybe not a Cologne priority over Risner or Tevin Jenkins, but I'm looking at those 2 guys, and I'm saying, hey, get me one of the top end guys, and I'm confident you could get Cologne for $5 million or less.
Well, I think you're cooking first and foremost, Daniel.
I appreciate that.
I think you're absolutely cooking, but I want you to stay here. Like, there's a guy in the draft. You talked about Ted Karras. Ted Karras and his ability, right, to be the center, not only this year, next, but maybe just for the future.
Yeah.
Don't sleep. There's a guy that the Bengals met with at the combine, and apparently they liked him a lot. Jonah Monheim out of USC. He is a US starting center for USC. He is a guy that I think that the Bengals really like, and I think that if he was there in the 3rd round, the Bengals might even pull the trigger on him personally. That guy, I believe, is going to be a superstar. So, like, the fact that we have to talk about interior offensive line right now, man. The fact that we got to talk about interior offensive line because of the lack of moves the Bengals have made. To me, right now, Daniel, going back to the guard and free agency, the best guards on the board, Tevin Jenkins 1, Brandon Sheriff 2, and then you got Will Hernandez. Yep. To me, you have to make a concerted effort to sign 2 of these guys.
Yes.
Make a concerted effort to sign 2 of these guys. Brandon Sheriff, we know the cliff is going to happen at some point. It hasn't happened yet. Do not operate in fear. Do not operate in fear and saying this guy's going to fall off a cliff at some point. Don't let the fact that you haven't signed T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson, or Jamar Chase stop you from getting better. Football is built through the trenches. You still need to build it from the line out. You still need to do that. And that's something that the Bengals need to make happen. That's something that they need to make happen before the draft. They need to make a concerted effort to get better. That's what I like to see from them moving forward. But as we keep talking it all through, I know we're gonna move on over right to the defenders. And do you want to stay up over at the TWSN Telestrator or what?
No, yeah, I've got one last point to make.
Let's hear it.
It's just on these lower end guys. Just people are talking about like a Liam Eichenberg, in my opinion, and from seeing what Dolphins fans have said, and obviously it's a completely different system. I'm out on Liam Eichenberg, but a guy who is interesting, and this is bottom barrel. This is your second guy. This is somebody who you bring in to compete. Maybe a Dylan Raduns.
He came right from North Dakota State, just like Cordell Volson, right? So you have two guys, right?
And the concern is they brought in, I'm forgetting the name, but the Titans brought in somebody, an offensive lineman, who was to be an upgrade over these guys. And the guy who they brought in, from what I've seen, was not the greatest offensive lineman in the world, but he's a guy who I would personally be willing to take a shot on if we're talking the back end, right? I remember watching him at for the 2021 NFL draft, and this dude is an absolute mauler. Once again, 6'6", just started off as a tackle, one of the best in the run game as a tackle, but he's somebody who he kicked inside, the past 2 years, 900 snaps at right guard this year. So he's one as the back end. I'm not discussing Liam Eichenberg. Like I said, I thought he was piss poor this season, but Dylan Raduns is one guy who I'd be bringing in as competition at that second level offensive lineman.
But I think that's the disappointing part, Daniel.
Yeah.
It's like even talking about some of these other guys, these guys will be competition. There's no telling if they're a clear upgrade from what they currently have.
Yes.
And I think that's the big problem. That's the big problem. There's even that weird notion out there. Hey, maybe the new offensive line coach, Scott Peters, might take his old tackle who's sucked and take Jedrick Willis and say, hey, you know what? Let's put you at guard. That's an idea I've seen people flirt out there. I don't know if I love the idea. I don't even know if I love the fact that I don't even know if I love the fact that I don't even know if I love his football. I don't even know if he loves football enough to be like, hey, let's allocate real resource to bring that guy in here. Even if it is as a backup, you just don't know. You've seen him give up on so many plays out there. You've seen him, quote unquote, say he made business decisions. So, I know there are people out there that have talked about Jedrick, but I just don't know if that's somebody that I'd seriously consider. I don't know about how you feel about that, Daniel.
Yeah. I think, one thing that we went back and rewatched. It's very clear the year we rewatched, I'm pretty sure that was with Kitchens. That was one of the worst offenses I've ever seen. And I'm talking about Baker Mayfield and the running back going opposite ways. I'm talking about Baker Mayfield completely missing, a jet sweep. I'm talking about the offensive lineman going opposite ways. That was one of the worst film I've ever seen. But yeah, Jedrick is a guy who was highly touted at college. It would be new to him, right? He's a guy who's only played tackle. He'd have to kick inside to a guard. I would not even consider, and I'm not saying people are, I'm not considering him over any of these interior offensive linemen. If we're talking about Jedrick, we're talking at the bottom end of the interior offensive lineman, because I'd rather have a guy, like a Dylan Raduns who's played guard, rather than say, hey, Jedrick, to be our starting guard right away, we're going to try you out right away. And I don't buy that. So.
For sure. Well, listen, we appreciate everybody for tuning in so far. Dan's going to stay up at the board. We're going to talk more about some of these. What do you want to go to? Do you want to go to the interior defensive line?
We can go wherever. Honestly, pass rushers.
Oh, we can go to some pass rushers. But before we do, if you guys could do us a huge favor, give this video a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live. Again, this is day 3 of free agency frenzy, although there has not been much action outside of the Bengals making a few signings of their own. We'll be live Monday through Friday, right? We've been live Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We're pushing the show time back to 8 p.m. Just we want more people can tune in, obviously getting off of work and stuff like that and having dinner with family. So we want to be cognizant of it. Again, this is a show for the people. So again, make sure you guys turn on post notifications so you guys aren't missing when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Listen, as much as people are excited about the Bengals bringing back Joseph Osai and the question marks that are around a guy like Trey Hendrickson, to me, the Bengals still have a major hole at the pass rush position. Notice I didn't mention anyone else. I didn't mention Cedric Johnson because although he showed flashes, it's not a known product just yet. Myles Murphy has struggled so far. Could he make a big step this year? Absolutely. Let's talk about some potential pass rushers the Bengals could still add as we start to enter into wave 3, wave 4 of free agency. We know that they love to strike on some of these lower level deals. So, Daniel, I want to get to some of your favorite pass rushers that are still available And let's see what some of your thoughts are.
Yeah, for sure. This board isn't so. There's one guy I'm going to talk about, and let me just go through a couple guys real quick. Watch some film on Caleb Chase on. Interesting, right? I think that this dude's got potential. He only played last year on the right side, and he had some success. When they switched him over to the left side, Max Crosby switching back and forth. Chase's a guy. He had success in the Bengals game as well, and that's something we've pointed to and alluded to many times. The Bengals like to go against, after guys that have had success. So Caleb Chase's an interesting one. Another one, and Chase's more the bigger, longer arm guy. Another one who is interesting is Josh Uche. He started out with the Patriots this season, and the first game against the Bengals, he had a good game. And he's more of your smaller, quick twitch, your pass rushing down specialist. That's what you're getting out of him. I saw him get bullied in the run game, and he had, a stint with the Chiefs. Patriots traded him to the Chiefs, and it wasn't very encouraging. I'll say that he was fine with the Chiefs, but they had Charles Omenihu. They had, obviously George Karlaftis. So Uche is definitely gone from Kansas City. So he's be one, I'd be entertaining because at this point, Malik, how the room is shaping out, you could get a big body edge rusher to complement Trey Hendrickson, but I'm looking at specialists here. I'm either looking at a guy who's going to be a run defender, an absolute specialist, kind of take over that Sam Hubbard role, or I'm looking for pass rushing specialists. And like I said, if we're looking at pass rushers, there's one guy. I don't know how likely this is, Malik, because I know the Bengals don't go after older guys, but Von Miller is very interesting, right? And I have seen, some people say, oh, could he go back, to Dallas? Von Miller is 36 years old. I understand, but I'll go to his stats in a second. This dude, when he was on the field, he was still an absolute baller, right? He was playing 80% of downs, pure pass rusher. This dude was not playing on first down. But when we look at what he did against the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs, when you look at what he did against Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs, this dude was making, offensive tackles look silly, Malik. This dude still got a spin move. He's still got, his bull rush. This dude is a pure pass rusher. And I understand he's a little bit older, but looking at him and looking at what the Bengals need, if they were to find a way to get him for less than $6 million, a $5 to $8 million range, I think it's something valuable, right? Because you're setting yourself up for success in the draft. You're getting a guy who's saying, hey, I can pair him with Trey Hendrickson. I truly believe Trey and Von Miller on passing downs would be a living hell for opposing teams. So like I said, Von Miller, when people say, oh, well, he didn't deserve the contract. Of course, he didn't deserve that massive contract with the Bills, but we're talking about the player. And I truly believe if he were on the Bengals, I think that they would see much more pass rush from the opposite end of Trey Hendrickson than the Bengals have seen in 5+ years. So he's an interesting one, but the rest of these guys, they're just fine. Matt Judon's getting a little bit older, had a very poor year in Atlanta. Dante Fowler Jr. was an interesting one that I was definitely thinking about. Like I said, a little bit older, but he had a very encouraging year with the Washington Commanders. So DeMarcus Lawrence just got signed. And obviously everybody's favorite name, Azeez Ojulari. I like Azeez, and I still wouldn't be opposed to an Azeez, right? He's a guy, he had massive success against the Bengals. But is the Joseph Ossai signing enough for the Bengals? They may see it that way. Me personally, I wouldn't. So the names I'd be looking at is either an Azeez Ojulari, a Von Miller, or I'm just going to wait to the draft. So that's how I kind of view the pass rushers.
Listen, man, the way I view it is, how could you get so close as you did, and then you still just rest on your laurels? You see how talented your quarterback is. You see what he did this season. You tell everyone within earshot, we're going to get better, right? We're going to get better in the trenches. We're going to make it a focal point. We're going to get better amongst the defensive line. That's the calling card that they sold everyone on that would listen. Insiders, people that covered the team. This is what they did. This is what they said. And then you just go out there so far and you lay a dud. People talk about a guy like Yannick Ngakoue. This is the guy the Bengals put a waiver claim in on. That didn't happen. It didn't work out. But now you're actually in the dance table. This guy has been a free agent the last few seasons. You got to wonder how many marks kind of come there. From my understanding, Marion Hobby, with him having ties to Yannick Ngakoue, was a big reason why the Bengals thought it kind of made sense for him to be here in Cincinnati when they put a waiver claim on him. Marion Hobby is no longer the defensive line coach. So again, for a lot different philosophies change. Different people don't know some of these players that we're talking about. But my thought process is, how hard is it to actually just want to get better?
Yep.
How hard is it to just place a phone call? And this is some of the same things that we talk about when it comes to trading some players. Why do we overprice things? This is what I warn people about when it came to a potential trade of a Trey Hendrickson. Just because they said, hey, Trey, we are allowing you to see what you are worth on the open market does not actually mean, I'm not even see what you're worth on the open market. We're allowing you to go out there and seek a trade does not mean that is signed, still delivered, does not mean that Trey Hendrickson is actually getting traded. The Bengals were always going to move how the Bengals move. The Bengals were always going to overvalue their players, understanding that the situation is less than ideal for both parties. They are a team that has constantly shot themselves in the foot, and I don't know what the logic behind the Trey Hendrickson situation is. To me, you have 6 picks in the draft this year?
Yep.
And you have the potential to probably add another premium pick for a guy that you clearly aren't meeting his asking price because you came in with a $23 million offer for a guy like Trey Hendrickson. Okay, so if a team is offering you a second or a back and forth, why are you then trying to up the ante on a lot of these teams? You're not going to always win the trade by astronomical amount. Now, the Bengals could certainly trade Trey Hendrickson tomorrow, and they could look like the absolute breadwinners. I could be wrong, but what are you saving up all that cap space for? What are you trying to get across? So for me, it's just a lot of question marks regarding how, the roster construction is built. We talked about it. It's cool to draft these players. It's cool to make a push, but the important part and the most crucial part is how do you keep that championship level roster together? And the Bengals have done a piss poor job of doing so. Seeing guys like DJ Reader walk out over the years, seeing guys like Jesse Bates walk out over the years, having your stars be upset, right? You got Jamar Chase putting out messages on Instagram, pretty much saying, hey, know your worth, not going to sign for anything less than what you're worth for. Got T. Higgins posting Glocked up, they won't let me out. You got Trey Hendrickson requesting a trade. It's like this thing very quickly has turned from everyone excited to rule the jungle, rule the locker room, and all this BS to, players being disgruntled. And it's not an ego thing. At some point as a team, you got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, we want to get better when we want to do right by our players. It was really cool. The one thing I'll say about the Sam Hubbard retirement, it was really cool to see a player play his entire career in Cincinnati and announce his retirement.
Yeah.
That was really cool to see because that's something that I feel like the Bengals have not had in quite some time. And I think a lot of it goes down to you could draft players all you want, but at some point you have to do right by the players. At some point you can't make this into a pissing contest. Trey Hendrickson has been one of the best pass rushers, if not the best pass rusher in the National Football League the last 2 years. He has earned every bit of what he might be asking for. He's earned it. 17 and a half sacks back-to-back years. The guy is, when we tallied it up, Daniel, 30 sacks or something like that, away from being the Bengals' all-time leader in sacks?
Yeah.
To me, this is what this guy has done. He's been just a model of consistency since he's been here in Cincinnati. And to be honest with you, he is playing for way less than what he should. I don't just think about the Bengals drafting players. I think about, okay, what's the long-term ramifications of said players that they draft? Because you almost have to approach it with that situation. You have to, because you never know, okay? You never know who's watching. You never know who's watching. You never know the impact that it might have. Unfortunately, the Bengals in recent years have seen this trend of their really, really good players have walked out the door. Guys not named Joe Burrow, still here. But it's disappointing nonetheless to see. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Malik, it's frustrating. And the Trey Hendrickson conversation, I understand, from a pure contract standpoint, we got to get the most.
Breaking news, I just wanted to say this: Cam Sample has re-signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. We all know Cam Sample's coming back off of an Achilles injury, but he's back with Cincinnati. He's another guy that's back in the fold. So there is a heartbeat there. The Bengals are still doing something, albeit it's their own, but they're doing something. Continue, Dan. Sorry.
No, you're right. It's frustrating. And the reason why it's frustrating, and I forgot who said it on Twitter, but the Bengals, they looked at Trey Hendrickson the first time they signed him. They said, hey, 8.2% of the cap. At this point, Malik, I kind of, and I hate comparing the Eagles to the Bengals, but what the Eagles did with Saquon Barkley, and totally apples and oranges here, but they paid Saquon Barkley based off of what he did before, as well as what he's going to do in the future. They gave that man a bag, a 2-year extension, an absolute bag, made him the highest paid running back. And that was out of, hey, also they won the Super Bowl, but that was a vote of confidence in him. That was saying, hey, you took a chance on us. We're going to repay you for that. And I understand the Bengals, you have to get the most out of your players. But the frustrating part about this is, oh, well, we've never seen a pass rusher continue to do it 2 years into the future. And Malik, we talked about this before. At some point, you got to trust the player. And everything that Trey Hendrickson has shown us as a player is that dude is going to continue to be a star. Turn on the film. Look at what he did this season when the Bengals defense was nowhere to be found. Who stepped up on multiple occasions? It was Trey Hendrickson. It was multiple games. The Chiefs game, he got the Chiefs rookie tackle benched because of what Trey Hendrickson was doing. So this is a guy who I believe is a massive part of what the Bengals need to do. And
you're talking about Trey Hendrickson.
Trey Hendrickson. Sorry, Cam Samples up here. Yeah. Sorry, but yes, I'm talking about Trey Hendrickson.
But you know what's crazy? Duke Tobin at the combine, we don't want to pay more for the same exact team, albeit brought Cam Sample back for a 1-year deal. That is a 1-year deal. Brought back Joseph Ossai for a 1-year deal. You still have major questions regarding the future of the defensive line. You have Cam Sample coming off of a season-ending injury. Like, I understand you have to look at it and you have to say, okay, the clock is going to, tick at some point for a guy like Trey Hendrickson, but this is also a guy that hasn't shown signs of slowing down. 17.5 sack seasons back-to-back this year, led the NFL in sacks, and he's the only consistent pass rush that you have on the team. And yet still you're playing a very dangerous game. Are you saying Myles Murphy is the guy that we believe can line up next to him and be very good? Are you saying Joseph Ossai is going to step up into that role this year and take over those starter minutes? What is the message that you're trying to get across is the question that I have. It's very, very, Brando said, it's very puzzling. The direction that they're going, it contradicts everything that they have said going in. But again, like we said, like we said yesterday, this is a sign what the Bengals are saying. The issues that we had on defense, obviously Cam Sample didn't play last year because of the injury, but the issues that we had on defense aren't a result of the players we had. They're a result of a coach that we had.
Yep.
So they are expecting Al Golden to go in and make wholesale changes. And the Bengals could go out there and make major changes on the defense. And we could look at it and say, you know what? They ran it back with the same team, completely made major changes this year. And now, the defense turned a corner. So, it's going great. But at the same time, you still need talent in here. You still need players in here. That's just my thoughts, Dan. What are your thoughts on?
And I want to stay there. I think that's the point that has been the most interesting throughout going from the combine to free agency is they're kind of showing us what they believe, right? Whether it's them not wanting to spend money or them saying, hey, we believe in the players that we had last year. We just felt like they were injured when we talk about the secondary, and we felt like they just weren't put in the right position. So they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves, Malik. They're putting a lot of pressure on Al Golden to say, hey, you got to turn this defense around, quite frankly, with not a lot different talent right now. We're looking at literally nobody from the outside besides a defensive tackle from the Packers and a linebacker who's going to replace a major hole with Jermaine Pratt potentially. So how I view this, Malik, is I think that they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves for the round 1 pick, round 2 pick to say, hey, you've got to play significant snaps for us. And Malik, they're putting pressure to say, hey, you got to draft defense now.
Yep.
Because if there's guys that you love, like offensive line, or guys that you love, like a wide receiver, tight end, running back, those are out the board. You got to draft defensive line. So it's very interesting. Like, just looking at Cam Sample's numbers, these were from 2023. It was fine. He was, one of my, sleeper quote unquote prospects, but he was fine. He was fine, Malik. He's fine. Okay. Like, he's not the answer for the pass rush. And that's what concerns me. I like Joseph Ossai. I've said it time and time again. I like him on the inside. I think he's a fine rotational piece who could develop into a major, part of your rotation, but he's not your starting edge rusher. I don't view him as that. And you didn't pay him like he's starting edge rusher. You paid him for 1 year. So the Bengals are putting a lot of pressure on themselves. So my favorite move so far, I like re-signing Joseph Ossai. I like TJ Slayton. I like Burks. I struggle to see where the juice is coming to the pass rush as of right now. So
I'll tell you right now, I fully believe the Bengals are going to draft a defensive end this year, Daniel.
they have.
I fully believe the Bengals are going to draft the. We were talking about it at the combine, and I told you I know that they really like James Pierce Jr. Will James Pierce Jr. be there? That's going to be the question. I'm very curious if they would draft Mike Green, especially with all those character concerns, but also the size, right?
Yep.
Is it something that they're willing to overlook because it isn't what they traditionally do? And then you talk about a guy like Walter Nolan. They'll definitely have their pick of a guy that they want. But to me, I really hope that they don't say to Trey, "Hey, Trey, you're going to play this last year on your deal in Cincinnati," because I just think that's just a weird place to be for everybody.
Yes.
But defensive end is definitely going to be what they're letting the cat out of the bag. If any other team that's picking at 18, 19, or 20 or 21 love a defensive end and you want to know what the Bengals are doing, the Bengals are going to draft a defensive end in the first round this year. They're making it very, very clear regarding that. I just think it's a dangerous game, man. And this is sort of what we talked about with Trevor. This is what we talked about with a lot of people at the combine who we sat down with. It's part of their MO, and it's you're banking on someone's potential, right, in the development. And maybe Al Golden and Jerry Montgomery can get the most out of these guys. Who knows? But you're banking on a lot when you could just pay your guys, man. You're banking a lot, man. You're banking on a lot when it comes to the future of this defense, because the defense, albeit, is running it back with virtually the same exact roster. And it's just very interesting because you have the money to spend. You have the money to get better. And you're just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really did expect more.
For sure. And I think that you brought up a great point. The Bengals kind of do this thing where they kind of tell you in advance, especially, look at last year, right? The offensive line spot. It was pretty sold that they were going to have to go offensive line. They were going to go. It was one of the best tackle, classes, quote unquote, we've seen in ages. So they went with the strength of the class, and it's very similar here, right? Well, I'll discuss some of these defensive tackles. I think that round 2 and round 3 is the sweet spot. And I think that there's guys like Aeneas Peebles, Deion Walker. So for me, it's really round 1 is going to be a Walter Nolan / edge rusher conversation. And when you look at the edge rushers, there's a lot of these talented guys. Obviously, you look at Mike Green is the one, the nation's leader in sacks. There's some other guys. And my concern, Malik, is they're going to love the size of Mykel Williams, 6'5", longest arms in the class, absolute behemoth of an athlete, dude who's only 20 years old, but who has not a lot of production. Same thing, in the pass rush. And same thing, Shamar Stewart. These are guys that I feel the Bengals could be banking on right away. And that's my fear, right? My fear is you bring in a Mykel or Shamar and say, hey, you got to start day 1 for us, because it's either you, Osai, Miles Murphy. And so when I look at it, Malik, I really think what I would want, it's got to be James Pierce or Mike Green. That's how I view it. And I think that those are the two guys. James,
if Walter Nolan's there, you have a discussion though, right?
Yes.
Right.
And that's my concern with Nolan is I just like the pass rushers in round 2 better. And
Really?
not better than Nolan, but as a pure value.
Okay.
I think that the value of getting Deion Walker or Peebles in round 2 or round 3 is better than Nolan.
So here's the issue with attacking it the way the Bengals have attacked it. What do you do? Hear me out.
Yep.
What do you do if you don't address the guard spot to their liking in round 2, and then you have to feel the need to reach at the guard spot? What happens then? Because you can't go past round 2, right? Because at that point, anybody that you draft round 3, round 4 is not is less of a sure thing. It's much more of a project.
Yeah, and Malik, that's the issue, and that's the main discussion right now. I agree with you. It's you got to feel the need now. You have to. There's no reason you shouldn't. I look at all these guys, whether it's Jenkins, Reisner, Scherf. I need one of those at least.
Right. Because Daniel, here's my thing real quick. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
What happens, man, if you go in and you don't address the guard spot effectively the way that they want to? Oh, we tried to make phone calls and things didn't pan out the way we wanted it to. What if you do all of that, right? Let's say you draft the pass rusher in the first round, like we're all expecting him to. Then the second round rolls around. And you didn't address that guard spot. Now you feel like you're reaching. What if Xavier Watts is sitting there? Right? What if Xavier Watts is sitting there? What if Deion Walker from Kentucky, who I know you don't necessarily love, but what if those guys are sitting there? Then what do you do? Because you've now pigeonholed yourself and you said, we didn't address guard effectively the way we wanted it to. We drafted a defensive end in the first round or defensive tackle, depending on Walter Nolan or whatever. What are you doing now? You are pigeonholing yourself as to what you could. That's just my thought process. I don't know.
No, totally. And that's where, like, I'll discuss a little bit more, but something else that was interesting, Malik, I'll get the stats in a second. But when you look at the safety position, you have Geno Stone, who played about 95% of the snaps last year. Jordan Battle played 40%, near the end. But you still, Von Bell, Malik, played a lot of snaps last year. He's out the door. So right now, you've got two guys in Stone and Battle that you're confident. But knock on wood, somebody gets hurt. Who are you relying on? Dejon Anthony, I think he's got potential. I think he's a guy that deserves to be in this room. Obviously, people will throw out Tyson Anderson. For me, I'd be entertaining one of these free agent guys, or you're looking to the draft. And that's what concerns me about going about it this way, Malik, is, hey, if you're heading into the draft respectfully, if I'm looking at safety, you're going round 2, right? Round 2, maybe round 3, but round 2 is the spot where you want to draft a guy who you could be confident could be the starter down the road, whether it's Andrew Makuba, whether it's, some of these other guys, or obviously Xavier Watts. And if you're looking at that point, then where does defensive tackle get left at? Where does your interior offensive line get left at? So the fact that they're not addressing the interior offensive line is a major problem as of right now. So how I view this and how I view my Bengals free agency checklist, I'm looking at, I need 2 guys. I need one of these Jenkins, Scherf, Reisner, and I need one of the bottom guys, like a Tristan Colon, like a Dylan Raduns. And at that point, I can head into the draft and I could draft best player available.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you look at some of the names from a defensive back standpoint that are still available. Julian Blackman is a guy that I'm surprised is still available, to be completely honest with you, versus some of the safeties like Derek Foster went off the board today to the Bills. That was kind of shocking to me. Daniel, you can come back over in the studio, man. Daniel did a great job. Did a great job at TWS and Teleshow. We greatly appreciate it, Daniel. Yeah, I want to get to some of the moves that were made here today. What was, in your eyes, one of the best moves, essentially, or sneaky good addition that maybe we're not talking about enough?
There was a lot of good additions, and I'm excited to talk about some of these, Malik. One of the teams I think that has done a phenomenal job. First off, A.J. Dillon to the Eagles is fun. That is one of the moves that I'm looking at saying, hey, they've lost a lot of guys, right? They lost Milton Williams. They've lost Josh Sweat. But adding A.J. Dillon and Saquon Barkley to that offensive line is scary. It is.
By the way, Cam Jordan just signed back with the New Orleans Saints, so he's back. No one ever thought he was actually really leaving. He seems like a career lifer for the Saints there. So just want to throw that out there. Sorry, continue.
No, that you're good, and that's good for them. Just I don't know how the hell they get all this cap, but
wow, cap teams that want to win find a way to win. Believe it or not, I think it's malpractice what the Bengals are doing, to be completely honest with you. You have a quarterback like Joe Burrow, who's talented as Joe Burrow, and you're not doing everything in your power to spend up to the cap to make this roster as competitive as possible. And then you wonder why we're in the same situation. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Signing 2 interior offensive linemen could be the direct change you might need in terms of fixing the run game, getting more consistent in the run game. I know the run game was better this year, but still, could you imagine if you had 2 better interior offensive line? What that could look like if Joe Burrow is upright and not on his back almost every single play. You have less concerns about what, Joe Burrow dropping back X amount of times a game. You have more, you have less concern about them mixing it up and being a more balanced, offense. There's a lot that goes into it, man. There's a reason why people are pounding the table saying, hey, the Bengals have to change their approach and how they view the interior of the offensive line. But that's just me.
No, you're right. And like I said, the Bengals are in a spot where other teams are filling needs, Malik. And Jim Gagner said, I really like the Kyer Elam trade for Dallas. I like it too. Kyer's a guy, first round grade, or, drafted in the first round. He struggled this year, and he struggled a lot. But give him a different team. Let him produce. He's an outside corner. He's a boundary corner. He's very grabby, but if he's got the talent to match up man to man with your biggest receiver, with the DK Metcalfs of the world. So giving up a 5th or 6th round pick, I thought it was great. The Denver Broncos, I think, are doing a phenomenal job right now. Evan Ingram, and this is what a team that is serious about competing, this is what they look like, right? They look to fill holes on their roster. The Denver Broncos, Malik, they could have sat back and said, hey, Colson Loveland could be their round 1. Gunnar Helm, Mason Taylor will be their round 2. But they went out and they got it, Evan Ingram. They went out and they made that move to say, hey, regardless of what happens in the draft, they've got a guy now who it can help their young quarterback, who can pair with Cortland Sutton, who can pair with the other young wide receivers. So I was a very big fan of him, as well as them adding Dre Greenlaw, as well as them filling the hole at safety, Hufanga. I think the Denver Broncos have been doing a phenomenal job, and I thought Evan Ingram was a very good signing for them. Another team I want to shout out, I don't think that they signed any of these guys today, but real quick, the Chicago Bears, I think, are another example. Malik, they went out and they made 3 big moves on the interior offensive line. They said that was a big problem, and they got Joe Thuney, who was phenomenal for the Chiefs, maybe not so great this year. Jonah Jackson, they made the trade for him, and as well as one of the most underrated signings was center Drew Dahlman. He was the guy. I watched him with the Falcons. I watched their offensive line. He was the quarterback of that offensive line. He was massive for them. So I love what they're doing interior offensive line wise. And some other moves today, the Buffalo Bills, like I said, Joey Bosa, I thought it was a necessary move that they had to do, right? They paid him 12 mil 1 year. You've got to do it. The Bills are a contending team. They got Greg Rousseau on one side, but they lost a pass rusher on the other side. You have to make that move. Like I said, I thought that was good. The Lions re-signing Levi was big, but they also got another guy, Roy Lopez. It was somebody that nobody really talks about, but he's from the Arizona Cardinals. He's from the Arizona area. And when I was at college, I remember everybody discussing this guy. And the Cardinals,
nose tackle.
He's a big dude, and he's extremely strong. And he's somebody where you look at how Dan Campbell and their team run their defense. It's about building the trenches. And that's something Roy Lopez, only $4 million. Levi, only $4 to $5 million. That's how a dominant defensive lines get built. So I thought he was one of the more underrated signings as well. But just 2 other rumors real quick: Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson right now, it's right. The Browns and the Giants. It doesn't move me for the Browns. I wouldn't get it for the Browns, respectfully. I think you got the number 2 overall pick, and you should draft a quarterback. And if you're not, what does Russell Wilson do for you right now, respectfully? I don't think that their roster is at a point that they can contend. So Russell Wilson, and the same thing, Aaron Rodgers. It's the Giants or the Steelers. I just don't know also what the Giants are doing, right? Yeah. The Giants are all over the place quarterback-wise.
They're getting better with their overall talent, I would say, on their team. Paulson Adebo was a good ad.
Javon Holland
was a sneaky good ad.
Yeah. No, Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin. He's one guy where I think adding Javon Holland this year is going to make him shine a lot more, because Nubin can move into the box and be an absolute stud for them there.
Jim Gegner, we appreciate you, brother, for joining in. You're always on the chat. We appreciate you. He says, where do we think Cooper Kupp lands? I can tell you right now, at least I was told the Dallas Cowboys are in on Cooper Kupp. I know there was reports out there from people, the Dallas Cowboys are not interested as of yet of Cooper Kupp. That was just all just posturing, because the Rams were really trying to get assets back for a guy like Cooper Kupp. However, nobody was really budging on it, and nobody wanted to have it prolonged to date, right? That hey, you know what? Officially, Cooper Kupp, is going to be out there for a trade a little bit longer. So teams were hoping that the Rams made the right decision, as they did today, to move on from Cooper Kupp. It would not shock me to see Cooper Kupp land in Dallas. However, a sneaky team to keep an eye on for Cooper Kupp is the Kansas City Chiefs as well.
Ooh, yeah. Kansas City, that'd be scary, and I think he fits exactly what they want.
If he still has more in the tank, I don't know if he does.
I think, well, if he goes to a team like that, I think he does, because respectfully, you've seen Juju Smith-Schuster do it. You don't have to do a whole lot in teams like that have it basically cut out for you. So I like that. I like Dallas. I think the Buffalo Bills, the Detroit Lions, honestly, are an interesting one. They got Jameson Williams. They got obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown, but St. Brown can play outside. If he wants to go to a contender, I think it's either the Lions or, like I said, the Cowboys. But it seems like the Patriots are just one that everybody's throwing out. And it's like, I get it. They're not a contender, but they could use a wide receiver. So, but I also know they like, Baker. They like Jalen Polk. And they got the number 4 overall pick. So I think that you could get Cooper Kupp. But if I'm Kupp, I'm looking at Lions, Cowboys. I'm looking for a contender.
Somebody said, why is Jim? Well, not somebody. Jim asked again, why is Asante Samuel Jr. still out there? Well, I think it's a thing of Asante Samuel Jr. was hoping to cash in big. He does not want to sign a 1-year deal with a team, but in all likelihood, that could be his reality. He might have to actually do that. because I don't think anybody's going to really allocate really big funds to him, especially coming off of a season-ending injury. Obviously, we know that shoulder injury is a little bit of concern for people. It's something that plagued him at the end of last year, and now it's something that reared his head this past year, where he calls him to miss the entire season. Will it be something that prolongs long? But he needs to put together a healthy season in order to get the money that he's hoping to get. And Asante Samuel Jr., this is his first time entering into the free agency market. We'll see what happens with him. I think that if a team is looking for to contend, right, and they need help on the defensive back field room, I think it wouldn't hurt you to throw $10 million at a guy like Asante Samuel Jr. just to see what he could potentially bring to you.
I like Sante, and I've liked him a lot. I think, like you said, it seems like teams are either scared about, because they said it was some illness, some with his body he's had since birth. So it's like it's either that or just lack of production. But like I said, I think he's got the chops to be a starting outside cornerback.
It's crazy how much stuff people throw out there for reasons why not to draft a guy, or I'm sorry, not draft a guy, not to actually go out there and make a concerted effort to sign a guy. I can't help but feel like that's simply happening. I think that's happening as well. When it comes to Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah, and just looking at somebody said, do you guys think or Gary Jellison said, do you think Juan Thornhill would be an upgrade over Geno Stone? I mean, like, yes, but the issue with that is, like, I mean, you're paying a dude what I'm not paying a Juan Thornhill to come in and start over Geno Stone. I'm not. Like, I think that Juan Thornhill this past year, I think he was with the Browns, right? He was fine. Like, he's good, but he's not a clear upgrade. The only clear upgrade, I think, would be a Julian Blackmon, but you're also looking at Blackmon, who's been consistent, but he really flashed at the beginning of his career. So how I view the safety room, I would try to get another body in here, but I think that you would be best suited and hope and move up in round 2 or round 3 and get one of these young safety to say, hey, let's get this guy behind Geno Stone for the season. Let's give him alternating snaps, and let's have our safety room be one of these young safeties like a Watts or Makuba and pair him up with Jordan Battle for the next 4 or 5 years. So I know you're playing a dangerous game, but Juan Thornhill's 29, 30. I think he's fine, but the way I view the safety room is that you either bring in a body to compete or you bring in somebody to start over Geno Stone. And the only guy I would be is Julian Blackmon. But Travis Schwaller said, who has the worst interior offensive line right now, Houston or Cincy? Houston's is pretty bad, but Cincinnati, I mean,
Cincinnati's is bad.
It's basically Cordell Volson and
Cody Ford right now.
Yeah, so
and they both play the same position.
Exactly. We had some people asking. Nolan Thomas brought up a great point. Did you see Deion Walker played with a broken back last year?
Yeah. That changed. Me and Daniel had a discussion for about an hour last night after the show regarding that because he's a guy that I like. He's a guy Daniel was on the fence about. I did think that he was being a little lazy, and now it kind of makes sense as to why. It kind of makes sense as to why. Someone asked, do we think that there's going to be any thing? I'm sorry. Should we stay up? Should we stay up for any news tonight? I would say go to bed. Go to bed. If anything happens, we'll be live. We'll be talking about it. I'm done. You guys heard what I said yesterday. They were hoping to have the Tevin Jenkins thing kind of put together by now, and it just didn't. So hasn't so far. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I know he's weighing his options, so we'll see. But as nothing to stay up about and lose sleep or be tired for work. Definitely. Regardless, if you don't catch us while we're live, you can definitely go back on the YouTube channel and catch anything that we do say if it does happen to be a live that we do at 2 a.m. I certainly won't be calling Jimmy to be doing producer duties at 2 a.m. So Daniel, perks of being close to me.
Exactly. The Akila the Great said, "What's your reaction if the Bengals run out Cordell Volson and Cody Ford? They can't. You can't.
They won't. Yeah. They won't. Cody. Listen, the Bengals are not a team that likes to admit they made mistakes, but he got benched several times. He got benched several times for obvious reasons, and I think that's them making. It was just weird to even see them bench somebody, right? It's not something they usually do, but they understood that they had to get better out there. So I expect them to make some sort of a change. How much of a change will it be? It's funny. Me and Joe were texting. Me and Joe Goodberry were texting before it started free agency. We were kind of swapping what we were hearing and stuff like that, and we both laughed. We said, when we both heard a thing about the guard, we said be aggressive with air quotations because we know their aggressiveness is not as is not as everybody else likes. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, and you've got to be aggressive. And people are asking, what do you guys think it's taking so long for Tevin Jenkins to sign somewhere?
He's got to make his decision. I mean, it's his first time hitting the open market. He's a young player. This is the last. I mean, if you play your cards right, this should be the last deal that he signs in his 20s.
Mhm.
I mean, big term, long term deal. He's 20, going to be 27.
Yeah.
You have to go in and do everything in your power to sign, to make the right decision for Tevin Jenkins. So you can't blame the guy for taking his time.
Completely. Our guy James O'Hara said, "Do we have the cap space to sign our wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, and Tevin Jenkins?" Yes. The issue, and I'm not exactly sure the exact money that got changed around, but the fact that T. Higgins now, right, officially playing on the franchise tag, I think it cuts some of this money that you could potentially have had this season. But yes, like right now, the Bengals have, I believe, 26 million to play with. So Tevin Jenkins, he's not going to be making more than at most, I would say 18. That's what Will Fry's got. I think realistically, it's going to be the 10 to 15 range for Tevin Jenkins. So they totally have enough money to get him.
10 to 15 range. You better hope it's not in the 15 range. That's not happening.
Really?
Cincinnati's not signing for 15. That's not what they do. If you're saying 15 million, you mean the total life of the contract would be that. They're not paying him 15 million. Tevin Jenkins is deserving of a huge pay raise, but injuries have been something that have, even though I don't think the injuries were significant, I think it was about where he was playing, right, in the circumstances around him. I think both parties just needed a divorce at that point, but they're not paying him 15 million annually to do anything.
Yeah.
They will not do that.
And Mr. Whispers is saying the Giants and Seahawks, the other two rumored teams, have no quarterback. What's the holdup? The holdup is definitely money. It's him, figuring out the situation. There's a lot of players where they look. It's not just about can I win. Respectfully, this is their livelihood. This is their chance to make their families not have to work. Their chance to get generational wealth for them, hopefully that can last their lifetime, because a lot of these guys get 1 to 2 big contracts. So there are some people that would definitely look for contenders, but a guy like Tevin Jenkins is trying to make his money, and rightfully so for him. Wyatt said, "Why didn't we sign anybody before the new year? Why do we waste money and then get stingy with money?"
I think first and foremost, the people signing before the league year starts, tampering period, and where teams are just throwing a lot of money. Usually the teams that are kind of desperate, I would say, do that. Bengals were one of those before with DJ Reader and stuff like that. And, even the Trey Hendrickson thing, they had to try to outbid some teams because they were bad and teams didn't want to go there. I saw somebody even ask about the Adam Schefter thing. Adam Schefter kind of alluded to free agents not wanting to sign in Cincinnati because how Cincinnati's front office. I did not hear that. I have not heard that, but I will say it wouldn't shock me because of you see the dealing of how you've dealt with elite talent of like Jamar Chase the second year in a row, how you've dealt with T. Higgins and how you've dealt with Trey Hendrickson. The Trey Hendrickson one is the most baffling one, I'd say. Yeah. It's just downright disrespectful. I think anybody's going to obviously judge Cincinnati a lot harder because it's like, dude, the team hasn't won anything. You never won a Super Bowl, and now you're being stingy with money. You guys just came out of the bottom barrel of the NFL. Joe Burrow saved the franchise. This is what people around the league think about the Bengals. Joe Burrow saved the franchise. You signed Joe Burrow. Why are you not, going out there doing everything in your power to make that guy happy? Because most teams in the NFL would operate completely different how the Bengals are operating. But there's just some there's something that there's something that needs to change in that regards and how the Bengals operate and do business, because again, the rest of the league is watching. The rest of the league saw Joe Burrow go on his media tour, Super Bowl Radio Row, and now they seeing how the Bengals are operating. Here's point blank period. The Bengals have nobody to blame but themselves. They put themselves in this position. Duke Tobin, you put your foot in your mouth and you said you would make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in the National Football League. You said that. No one told you to say that at the podium. It's one of the few times Duke Tobin ever showed some emotion. But you said that at the podium. You said T. Higgins is a guy that we want to keep. So now you put all the pressure on that guy. When you franchise tagged him, you put all the pressure and you said, you know what? The onus is on us to get the deal done. Now the onus is on you to get the deal done. And now what? Your mom, right? So you have to find a way to get the deal. You have to find a way to get the deal done. That's like me saying, hey, you know what? I really value Daniel Alameda, right? Daniel's contract is coming up with TWSN. I'm gonna franchise tag Daniel so he can't negotiate with any other network. And then Daniel, it's time to negotiate with Daniel and got the 1-year deal. And I'm like, oh, well, Yeah, we view you this way. Well, you just told me and everybody in the media that you value me. You want me to stay here long term. You don't want me to negotiate with any other team. Yeah, I said that, Daniel. But here's what I view you at. Here's what I think you deserve. Okay, here, but the other teams are willing to pay me. Other networks are willing to pay me so much more. Why can't you just pay me what they're willing to? Oh, well, it's for reasons. We need to see more. What? So it's a very backwards ass way of doing business, and the Bengals again have no person to blame but themselves. And to be honest with you guys, it's bigger than a Duke Tobin problem.
Yeah.
It's bigger than this is a front office problem for the Bengals. The Bengals have made so many strides in how they operate as a business. The one thing that has not changed yet so far is how they construct their contracts, and it hurts them every single time they get to the negotiating table. The only person they did not play that game with, well, they tried to a little bit, but it got down to the last wire, was Joe Burrow, and they made the deal happen. You have no choice but to pay Joe Burrow. You had no choice now but to pay a Jamar Chase. You don't let Jamar Chase walk or even think about walking. You have no choice because you made the decision not to have a choice in letting T. Higgins walk. So now what? You have your feet to the fire. You have your feet to the fire now. You have put yourself in this situation. You knew what type of player T. Higgins was after year one. You knew what type of player Jamar Chase was after year one. You knew what type of player Jamar Chase was after year one. So why not get ahead of these things and try to extend these guys the moment the opportunity comes available to do that after year 3? Why do you not go out there and say, we need to do everything in our power to bring these guys back? It would be less expensive for you. And the Bengals used to do that. Mm-hmm. They did it with AJ Green. They did it with Andy Dalton. Can I be real with you, Daniel?
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes how much did those contracts, not with Andy Dalton, but like an AJ Green, when AJ Green signed that contract with Cincinnati, and then they kept bringing it back, and he kept dealing with injuries. I wonder how much does that plague in the back of their thoughts still with how they deal with business now? Mm-hmm. Because there was a point in time where Cincinnati was very good about getting ahead of the contracts before it got to this point. Somewhere along the line, it changed. And I'm not giving them any pass, but I do wonder what has changed regardless. They used to get ahead of their contracts. Like, I don't know if anybody remembers that. They used to sign these guys, Leon Hall. They used to make sure these guys didn't touch, even sniff free agency. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the illusion that we draft so well. Maybe it was the illusion of the success they had and that guys were replaceable. But the Bengals 100% used to sign guys prematurely just to kind of get ahead of it. I've seen them hand out so many deals. This didn't used to be as big of a deal as it is right now. And here we are. Now the Bengals are making decisions almost in a weird way. I don't know. I can't explain it.
No, you're right. And that's the frustrating part, man. You see these other teams who are extending their star players. And at this point, it's like, man, what's the goal? Are we trying to pinch them for any penny? It's the same thing like the Trey Henderson conversation. I understand not wanting to pay a guy after he's 30 years old, but this is a guy where you can't just lowball him. This is a guy who has said, I want to be in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know what? Actually, a point I want to make. Maybe it's just the league has changed. Maybe it's just so the league has changed and the Bengals have not caught up with the times. Maybe the cap has gone up so significantly, and teams are just throwing out these crazy deals, and Cincinnati is just scoffing, still operating like it's the mid-2000s. And they're thinking they can still sign these guys for how they used to when the cap is going up tremendously. I remember when it was a huge deal when the Bengals signed Andy Dalton to almost $100 million deal. I remember when and it was obviously heavily incentivized, but it was still great. It was like, damn, Cincinnati signed Andy. They believe in Andy Dalton. I wonder, is it just not changing with the times? And that's why it's important. Hear me out. That's why it's important to go out there and add guys to the front office regularly. That's why it's important to stay current, because while you're operating the way that you operate and you operate like a small time family business, when you think about it, it's like a mom and pop shop. It's like a mom and pop shop. You're a big pizzeria and big bakery and you're doing all this great stuff. And then this big corporate bakery comes in and they're absolutely crushing it. Why? Because they don't give a damn about personal relationships. They care about results. And well, they're getting results from the corporate industry. You're still operating like a mom and pop shop. Sooner or later, what happens? You get phased out. Mm-hmm. And then you get swallowed up whole by the industry. And now you're no longer a player in the industry that you probably were so great at. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe that's what it is. The Bengals are not operating like a modern NFL franchise. Yeah. It is 2025. Guarantees are bigger than ever. And it can't be, hey, we'll guarantee you the money, but it's going to be super backed by incentives. It can't be, players aren't dumb anymore, right? Players aren't dumb anymore. And I'm not saying they were dumb in the past, but they have a clear understanding of what the cap is. It's social media. They know what their counterparts are actually getting. Contracts actually get reported like right on the fly. People know what people are making around the league. And then now you got people that want to actually beat out their counterparts. They want to because they think that, hey, I produce better. It's the way the news gets delivered nowadays. When a guy signs a huge contract, they know. Everybody knows, and everybody puts emojis. Oh, shock face. You have to come current with how the NFL operates nowadays. You might be looking at it and saying, hey, you know what? This amount of money is so much money, but the rest of the league saying, we'll pay it. No problem. $40 million for a pass rusher? Oh, my God. I remember when we used to be able to sign a player for $60 million. And that was looked at as a breaking deal. Well, that's what happens when you keep the same front office and nobody is bringing in new ideas. That's what happens. This is the result that you're getting right now. You scoff so much at change and operating. Oh, well, we trust the people that we have. We don't want a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Well, a lot of cooks in the kitchen is how you got where you got. Don't fool yourselves. It wasn't like you were groundbreaking by drafting Joe Burrow or drafting Jamar Chase. You drafted Joe Burrow because you sucked and the dude threw for 60 touchdown passes in a college football season while leading the most dominant college football team. You didn't just scout this guy and you were just so great at it, right? T. Higgins didn't just fall. T. Higgins was also a guy that should have went in the first round. You had the second pick in the round. You drafted him. Great. You got him. Jamar Chase was a slam dunk pick. The dude was so dominant, he didn't even have to play his final year at LSU. He was going off of the last quarterback that threw him a touchdown pass at LSU was his quarterback in the National Football League. You didn't break the ceiling on how to evaluate when you drafted these guys. You drafted that guy because the Falcons said, you know what? We're going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to draft Kyle Pitts over Jamar Chase, even though Jamar Chase is a generational talent. So he fell into your lap. Bam. It was not like it was not like you just did something groundbreaking. And that's the thing. That's the part that they miss. But the biggest thing that I want to make sure I stay on track for is you don't allow more cooks into the kitchen. So you're getting the same type of feedback on a regular. You know, we go out to these draft parties and these combine parties, man, and we sit with people and we talk with people. You see everybody from every team at these parties. Am I right, Daniel?
Yes.
You see people mingling, having conversations. I swear to God, guys, you do not see one person from the Bengals organization mingling amongst people. You do not see. I have not, in all my years of going to the NFL scouting combine and going to these agent parties and going to these league parties I see Sean Payton. Me and Sean Payton had a great conversation this combine. You see all these different people on a regular basis. I have not seen Zach Taylor, Duke Tobin, not Troy Walters. What's the GM's name? Trey Brown. Yeah. I have not seen one member of the Bengals organization out at these events. Not once. And the reason what I'm saying is if you do not talk to people, how do you expect to make deals? How do you expect to have conversations? Mm-hmm. I saw Brandon Beane out every single night. Yeah. Every single night. I see people from all these teams out on a regular. The Bengals, I have never seen them conversating. Mm-hmm. And the notion around the league is exactly what I was saying for the entire season. They are the most difficult team to get on the phone and do a trade with. They're the most difficult team to get on the phone and do a trade with. They overvalue their players constantly to the point where some teams don't even call. Some teams already will call and they already know the answer is going to be something astronomical. They know it all the time. But I promise you, I've seen people from every team out. I have yet to see anybody from the Bengals out and about, talking, having discussions, having conversations. I remember I was asked once, does Lou Anarumo even want to be a head coach? I was asked that. Somebody asked me that. You never see him doing media for the Bengals. That's why he went on a huge media tour this past year where he was on Pat McAfee and was doing all this stuff like that and hired a new agent. It gets deep. It's not just in how they construct their contracts. It's how they deal with their the people around the National Football League. They really operate like a mom and pop shop, and they don't want new voices in there. Like, it's usually, you think about all the people that they do bring in, coaches, stuff like that, it's always because a guy knows a guy and a guy knows a guy.
Mhm.
Just my thoughts. What are your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, you're right. And I'm going to stick on that mingling part because I think that that's important. And I think that when you look at these other teams, bro, like other teams are trying to get better. I understand when you look at the numbers, right? The Bengals have spent the third least money on outside free agents so far. The only teams that are behind them are the Philadelphia Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Baltimore Ravens. So when I look at how the Bengals have approached free agency, it's not over yet, but it just frustrates me because you're banking on things that haven't done well before. You're banking on the draft. You're banking on these defensive line guys that haven't been consistent. That's what you're banking on so far. And it's also not like you got T. Higgins in place and Trey Hendrickson in place. So the Bengals right now, it's frustrating because what are the cornerstones? What is there to build this team off of besides saying, hey, they're banking on last season being a fluke.
Yep.
They're banking on last season, the start being something that Zach Taylor can correct like this. And what you can change and what's controllable is the talent that you bring into the team.
Do you remember when Duke Tobin started his press conference? He said, it pisses us all off. We're all upset. It angers us every single day because we know we're a championship level team and we didn't get a chance to show it at the end of the year. Oh, Big Duke talking. Oh, we talking. Hold on. We having a conversation now. Yeah, you're pissed? Yeah, Zach and us and all the whole standard. We're all aligned. We're all blah, 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 XYZ, yada, yada, yada. And then, listen, I could go all day, but I feel like I'm giving out too much tea right now. I feel like I'm giving out too much tea right now. It was funny, man. Duke Tobin gives his, speech, right?
Yeah.
At the combine and all this stuff like that. Then Zach Taylor walks up because he's right after him. And then Zach Taylor gets told word for word what Duke Tobin said and how to answer questions. And I'm overhearing the conversation. And and Zach gets up there and literally says, fire away. And he says the exact same stuff that Duke Tobin said. The exact same stuff. And I'm like, man, like, I'm like, it's
funny.
It's funny. Just the way it's like you're not getting anything authentic ever. Nobody's ever like, okay, this is what we think. This is how my opinion is. And I understand there's a PR part of that, right? That goes into it. But it's just funny just to see how it works out sometimes, man. Because like, that's what, just so y'all know, that's why I don't care to be front and center media. That's why I don't care, because I know you're getting the same regurgitated stuff over and over again. You're not getting anything original. You're not getting anything original. That's why for me, it's like you could be a fly on the wall in Africa and listen to a press conference, and the same type of stuff you're going to get over and over and over again from the same people at the top.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. And it's funny because that same conversation, the sentiment coming out of it was, wow, Duke Tobin's really changed. Duke's the guy. Duke feels it. Duke is bringing some energy, and you come to this free agency and it's not been that. So that's what it does make me believe, and it frustrates me like, hey, maybe this is just the organization. You hope that they can change at some point. It's very similar to look at the Dallas Cowboys. I think they're a perfect example, not comparing the two teams, but the Dallas Cowboys rarely spend big money for outside free agents. That's been their MO, and you can point exactly to Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, right? The past 10 years, I said the stat before, they have not gotten a single outside free agent for more than $6 million a year. That's their MO, and they've not changed. The Cincinnati Bengals have yet to fully change when it comes to getting outside talent into this team. So the way they're operating right now, it's not aggressive. It's not. And there's offensive line we just broke down. There's guys out here. Dalton Reisner. The question marks, there aren't many. Go out there and get that guy. Or are we just going to wait for this round 3, round 4, wave 5 of free agency? That's what pisses me off. And you just hope that
it was beautifully handled by Duke, though. I got to say that.
Yeah.
Because like this is the first time where he was like in front of non-Cincinnati true media. And he didn't want to get asked about, the tough question. So he started out by explaining what they all felt about this past season and how it pissed them off that they had 7 wins in the bank and then they somehow turned them into losses. I took away from that press conference, I don't know if you did, that a lot of blame was being put on Luanarumo.
Yep.
That's what I took away from the press conference. I said, I felt like they were pointing blame without pointing blame to a degree.
Yeah.
And it felt like everyone was trying to be absolved of the roster construction. So it's PR 101. It's what politicians do. We are mad. We are angry. We want to get better. We know we can get better. And here's what we expect to do to get better. We all are on the same page, and we're going to come out ferociousness and attack this offseason. At that point, what hard question could you be asked? Anybody that then follows up the question by asking you a question about the way that the season went or the roster construction sounds like an idiot because you already addressed it. Well, if you listen to my last question that I answered the way I answered it last time, I already answered your question. So, there's really nothing else to really talk about here. We want to get better. We are a championship level football team. Okay, that sounds great. You show more emotion. You show more fire. What else though? But it puts the media in a weird spot because we can't. When we ask you the next question, we feel dumb.
Yeah,
it's like, all right, well, they ain't much to ask. He talked about how they suck. He talked about how they felt like they turned 7 wins into losses. He talked about how they're going to get better. He talked about how they're going to aggressively attack free agency. So only question I could ask the guy was, hey, you talked about T, you talked about Trey. Is Mike Gesicki a priority? Yep, Mike Gesicki is a priority. I asked around, Mike Gesicki's a priority. Mike Gesicki's coming back to Cincinnati. Hey, is Cincinnati coming back to Cincinnati? Hey, he might test free agency. So then, okay, get that. Or, Cincinnati's going to make Mike Gesicki a priority. Heard that the negotiations were going strong. It happened. Bam, boom. So that's the one thing of his statement that so far has rung true. It has rung true.
Yes.
But it does put media in a weird spot because it's like, what do you ask? How do you, if you only make yourself available 1 to maybe 2 times a year, and I only say the 2 times because when draft picks come in,
yeah,
this is my thoughts, man. I like, listen, and like I said, I know they don't like me breaking news, and I know I've been called and told, hey, and they try to slow down on news and blah blah blah. I know all that, but at the end of the day, if I have to continue to use my voice, not to say my voice even matters, if I have to continue to use my voice to apply pressure and say things that need to be said, the national media are just yelling into a vacuum, saying a lot of that they don't actually know what's actually going on around Cincinnati. So they just say a lot of the things that other people are saying. Me, I'm actually in the heart of Cincinnati. I moved to Cincinnati because I think Cincinnati is an untapped sports media market. And I also don't work for the Bengals. You don't have to see me on this show, and you don't have to ever worry about me holding my tongue for the sake of, I guess, protecting a friendship, a relationship, the whole 9 yards. I think a New York style, New Jersey style of media applying pressure is good for Cincinnati. It's something that they haven't seen before. Like, at the end of the day, again, the message needs to be, I think they need to address the fan base. I think they need to address the overall of the team more often. I think they put too much pressure on a guy like Zach Taylor to answer questions the front office should be answering. Because then when Zach Taylor sits in front of the podium, you get asked about the contracts, and that's not something he does. His job is to coach the football team and get the football team prepared. Duke Tobin doesn't make himself available. Howie Roseman is very, very, outspoken for the Philadelphia Eagles. You hear from often. I think they sometimes even have press conferences and stuff like that. Now, you don't want to get to a point where it's like Jerry Jones and all you do is you hear from ownership. At the end of the day, it's, yeah, I don't know. I have thoughts. I'm just going to, I'll keep it to myself.
You're right. And my takeaway from this, Malik, is that the only way that this really pans out, especially with the way that they're, making it seem that the talent wasn't fully the issue on the defense last year, is if these guys just ball out. Like, you're banking on Joseph Asai having 8+ sacks. You're banking on Miles Murphy playing 40-50% of the snaps. That's what you're banking on. You're banking on, BJ Hill being that interior pressure guy. You're banking on your first round pick defensively being a dominant pass rusher. That's what you're banking on. And Malik, to expect all 5 of those things to happen is not very likely, but that's the avenue that they're saying. And if that's the way that they feel confident, then go for it, right? That's on you, but you also put yourself in a position respectfully. If it doesn't work out this year, if you start off slow again, Duke Tobin organization, you guys put pressure on Zach Taylor, because there is going to be uncomfortable conversations if Zach Taylor can't get this team right at the beginning of the season again. And are we going to blame it on, the personnel? Yes. If we look at the defense, Malik, and they start off slow this year, are we going to blame it on the lack of a pass rush? Yes. But at some point, people have to, respond to failures. We saw Lou Anarumo was the guy who it was this year. We saw the other coaches. If they don't make the playoffs this year, if they don't go on a deep run in the playoffs this year, and you're not supplying them with the amount of talent, ownership ain't going nowhere because they're here. Duke Tobin likely isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Zach Taylor, is there a conversation? And at that point, that's what pains me, because so far throughout this free agency process, I don't feel like they're putting this coaching staff in the best possible position to succeed. So Al Golden, I feel like with this defense, he's got his work cut out for him. And they're banking on these coaches, and they're banking on Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase being dominant. So it frustrates me. And like I said, I keep saying this, but my takeaway is putting a lot of pressure on this first, second round draft pick. You're putting a lot of pressure on Joseph Osai. You're putting a lot of pressure on Miles Murphy, because that's how you're approaching it. And I'd be very concerned if Tevin Jenkins goes to another team. I'd be very concerned if Dalton Reisner goes to another team, because at that point, put self behind the 8 ball when it comes to these other free agents, and it puts self behind the 8 ball when it comes to the draft. So superstar teams and teams that are in the playoffs every single year, and teams that are contenders every single year, they dominate the draft and they fill holes in free agency. And the Bengals did not do that last year, and they haven't done that so far this year. So they're banking on their team from last year, and they're banking on the guys that they got in the locker room. And I just don't think that's the recipe for success right now.
I agree, man. Somebody said, Michael Ruffin says, you need to do a live show in front of Paycor and bring the people out. Man, don't tempt me with a good time, man. We're working here at TWSN. We've got a lot of awesome things, planned. But listen, if anything happens regarding news, we will be live.
Yeah.
We will talk it through. I understand everybody's frustration. I understand why people are pissed. I understand why people are annoyed. You want to see more activity. I want to see more activity. Hell, activity is fun. Conversations are fun to have. One thing's for sure is the Bengals cannot go into the draft, with the same team that they virtually had last year. I certainly have my thoughts on some of the moves that they made in terms of how they handled some stuff.
Yep.
Right now is not the time to say what that is, because I want to see how the rest of this free agency process plays out. There are still some names on the board that the Bengals can add that would completely upgrade this team. There are still some moves on the defensive end that I think the Bengals can do that would completely upgrade this team. We will see what happens. I'm excited to talk it through. I'm excited to have the conversation. We'll be back live again tomorrow at 8 p.m. to talk this all through. Same conversation, same crew, same people. And if anything happens tonight, we will talk it through. We will be live. But again, do not sacrifice sleep, schedule the whole 9 yards, right, for the Bengals moves that they potentially could make or choose not to make. Mm-hmm. If T. Higgins signs an extension, we will be live. If Jamar Chase signs an extension, we will be live. If a free agent signing happens, we will be live. Of course, if it's like a backup running back, we will not be live. But anything else, we will be live. We appreciate y'all for tuning in. We appreciate y'all for, giving this video a like and subscribing to the YouTube channel. Like I said, we will be back live tomorrow unless something happens, here shortly. But we appreciate y'all. Remember, there's only one way you should be looking at your sports news. There's only one way that you should be looking at free agency news as we break it all down. And that is the right way. Make sure you guys head on over to Paul Dehner, Jay Morrison. They're live right now. Charlie Goldsmith. They do a great job. They cover the team. Head over to their live. and show them support. And I think James Rapino will be live later on tonight. Make sure you guys show them support. We have so many amazing creators, beat writers, people that cover this team. And I just make sure you guys show them support. They all do a great job. And as far as the Eagles Bengals talk, I have not heard that. I'll say that I have not heard that, but we'll leave it at that. But listen, we appreciate y'all so much. We'll see you guys tomorrow, unless any news breaks, for another episode of Free Agency Frenzy Day 4, covered by TWSN. And we hope that you guys have a great